Welcome to How Things Connect, where we get personal and planetary. Get ready to expand your consciousness with healing insight and evolutionary wisdom. I'm your host, Stephanie Wang, and I'm so excited today to welcome as my guest, Kerry Henwood. Drawing upon more than 40 years of healing experience, Australian native Kerry Henwood is an internationally recognized intuitive healer, inspirational speaker, and teacher. She studied extensively with numerous shamans and yogis around the world and combines her knowledge of ancient teachings to support the healing process in others. In her shamanic work, she draws particularly on the spiritual healing traditions of Peru and also utilizes sound healing as an integral part of her work. Welcome, Kerry. How are you?
Hi, Stephanie. Great to be here. Very
Great to
excited.
see you. Yeah. I still remember, of course, my very first ayahuasca journey was with you in Peru. And you led a group of us and took us down to South America. And not only did we experience just an extraordinary culture and have amazing exchanges with the local people, but particularly with the spiritual side of things, the ayahuasca journeys that we actually prepared for was conducted with you and another ayahuasquero in
Sacred Valley.
Sacred Valley. There we go. And that was very much a life-changing experience for me. In Australia, how did you start your journey into healing and shamanism?
Well, I'm from an interesting family, which is quite diverse. I was brought into an Irish Catholic family, which was my dad. And my mum and my grandmother were from the South Pacific. So they did medicine, as we called it, but they didn't call it shamanism in those days. And they were medicine women of their day. And it started off that way, although, my grandmother and my mother passed away when I was about 15. So I dropped the path. But I would love to acknowledge the women in my family at this moment because they gave me the base of what we call shamanically deep listening of nature. And so that's how it started. I went, after they passed away, I went very much towards the Buddhist path, alternative medicine. I studied Zen Shiatsu for many years in Japan, had a clinic. I think it was in 1987, which was interesting because it was considered what they call the harmonic convergence around that time, which was another planetary wonderfulness that happened here. And my friend had 4-stage cancer. And she said, let's travel the world. And I'm like, oh God, I mean, travel the world. I mean, you're ill. And so we did. We ended up one story to another, but we ended up in Ecuador in the rainforest and had our first drink, in those days quite large, of ayahuasca. And the Oscareros at that time said, oh, this is your calling. Your grandmother's calling you and the spirits are calling you, which is very traditional in shamanism if you are from a lineage and earth-based people. But I wasn't aware of any of this at the time. I wasn't taught that way. And so my whole ceremony was based on rekindling my ancestral lineage and spirit, and that I would eventually walk this path. We're talking in the 80s in very conservative Australia too. So, I was kind of like a shaman in the closet. And so my friend to this day is still alive after
Wow.
ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it started. And, once one enters this path, it is, you're not a weekend shaman. It's your life. It's your journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's your way of being.
How would you explain what shamanism is to someone who's not familiar with
Um, it's a medicine person who uses altered states of reality. And I don't mean that in the sense of actually even taking plant medicine. It's using trance states. It's using trance states by actually even just sitting in nature, deep listening, as my grandmother would say, and having a communication with nature, not being being separate from it. And I think the biggest interest about shamanism is the fact that everyone should be taught that as children, to
Mm-hmm.
interconnect with nature. And I think that that is obviously why there's such a huge interest in, especially the last 20 years, last 15 years in shamanism and plant medicine, is that the Western culture has religion, but it doesn't actually have its way. It's spiritual culture collectively. Although we're all born here, we should, be understanding the wonderful communication of nature. But we weren't taught that as children. We were
Mm-hmm.
taught either Christianity or some kind of dogma or nothing at all, to believe in nothing. So a shaman is the bridge between worlds. It's a bridge between understanding your mind and your heart and your emotional body. It encompasses a lot of different levels. We do take the approach that if you are traumatized emotionally, which is 99.9% of the population, isn't it, of the planet,
Mm-hmm.
then we have a word that we call soul loss, that your spirit is lost. Now, saying, Indigenous people can be lost too.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
your humanity, your human nature is not defined necessarily because you're an Indigenous person and that you are unapproachable to the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of life emotionally. So shamans, we use all alternative medicine. You can see this huge interest in microdosing now, with people that are terminally ill or anxieties, depression.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about that is that shamanism have always microdosed, and it's just actually come to the West now in the
Mm-hmm.
last so many years. But we always start with microdosing. We never do ceremonies where we're taking huge amounts of any plant. We microdose on a regular basis to allow our heart, mind, and body to be aligned.
Mm. Beautiful. It's really interesting. I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it's important for anybody who's listening is to, because right now there's such a trend, like everybody, is there are a lot of people who are into doing the ceremony work, actually going into that altered state, with hallucinogenic plants, sacred plants, and they start to, perhaps mix, how do I say this? There is there's a very big difference between doing plant ceremony work versus what shamanism is, which incorporates, like what you said, a much broader way of relating. It's relating to nature and being aware and connected with the relationship of ourselves as humans with the animal world and with the plant world and with just the natural world around us. And I think
Mm.
it's important to make that distinction instead of thinking of it as, oh, this is another way for me to have some kind of cosmic entertainment while I take some substances, and which one can do, but this is, I think you would be missing a huge part of what this has to offer.
Mm.
And the way you describe it, a shaman then is someone who starts to commune and be the bridge between nature and the rest of anyone um, who isn't a shaman, who is looking for healing and looking for getting realigned and recovering a lot of what was lost or fragmented in their soul. And there's a term you use called soul retrieval. Is that what that is about?
Yeah, soul retrieval is to let's backtrack a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
It's Westerners when they come to plant medicine, particularly, is they're taking a psychological look
Mm-hmm.
at themselves because something is broken,
Mm-hmm.
and so they feel, or an empty space, or depression, or post traumatic, and all the other things. Addictions is another huge thing because they have lost a piece of their spirit, which would be a terminology that we would use in shamanic culture. So the the medicine world was not keyed necessarily for psychological analyzing.
Mm-hmm.
It has gone that way in the West, and so be it. It is what it is. Um, the am I answering your question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Please continue.
And
Yeah.
so so lost is the part of your psychology, your ego, that is consumed by the the situation that has occurred, whether it's post-traumatic from a war or someone was raped or some kind of traumatizing thing that's happened. So in the field of energy, so if we move towards that at the same time, is that that takes up a lot of space in your reality. It's really in your neuro pathway that's creating like a trench that goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, right? In shamanism, we're like really probably the experts of energy healing. So we will use energy or without plant medicine, we will go into the energy field of someone, feel that contraction, begin to loosen it up through the power of prayer, unification. There is, and we put a little science in here, a critical mass that takes place. If everything is aligned with you, the practitioner, the shaman, and the person that we're dealing with, the client, a critical mass takes place. What that critical mass is the returning of your spirit, the returning of your soul. So let's go back again now and go, if you sat in nature, could you get that same result? Yes. But you still need a guide because one doesn't know how to approach nature. Oh, it's lovely sunset and I feel wonderful, but the next day your trauma's still there, right? So you need a guide. So I think, shamans would be literally the guide of many worlds and the guides of energy fields would be another way to say the shamanic practitioners. We believe that the formless reality of this world, the etheric, the spirit, the intelligence of the elemental world is just as real as you and I talking remotely in two different countries, so it's just as real as having a conversation with your friend over lunch. And we do not question that. It's real. It's, and it's goodness. And to know that is to know the world in which you live, the house in which you live. So that, the big interest towards shamanism and plant medicine is, I think the Western world is realizing how fragmented it is. And it's reaching out.
Interesting. With the many ceremonies that you've led and the people you've been working with, can you share some healing stories?
Wow. My personal stories. Yeah. I've been taking plant medicine for consistently 26 years. I started
it could be not just about you, but it could be, if you want to share a story about some of the people you've actually helped as well. Either way, it's great.
I can do both. I can do I've had so much profound experience. I believe the plant medicine absolutely, and to this day, has saved my life so many times, even from my own cancer, my own illness. We do a thing called diate, which is to sit in retreat on your own, and you take a combination of different plants, which is prescribed by the oscarero or the masters that you are working with. It could be something very simple too. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is hallucinogenic. It is the spirit component that we're looking for. I remember in this diate, I was having a really hard time, and just I felt broken. And what the plant was trying to show me is that was my thought I had about myself, that I'm broken and I can never be repaired. And it took me a long time to get around what it was trying to show me. And I just kept feeling like I was getting sicker and sicker. And I remember the plant saying, when you go home, go to the doctor. And so I'm like, doctor? So I did. And what the plant was showing me, that I had early stage breast cancer. And so I caught it really early. So that Would I have found that when I was in home? I don't know. You know, who can answer these questions really, right? I mean, it is what it is. I've had um, a client of mine, not ceremony, but be in just a session that came to terms with seeing certain things in his childhood. His mother had passed away, and the simple thing of not actually saying to her that he loved her caused him to have stomach cancer. And so we were in session. It wasn't for me to uh, heal the cancer in any way, shape, or form. Really, that's not my mission. But to at this stage allow him to have a peaceful transition, really,
Mhm.
and to come to conclusion, determining to come to why, how come this is here, why did he create it, and that's what how he created was the fact that he never said that he loved his mother, so it infested inside of him. This man would come every session and he would cry and cry and cry for many many sessions, and he shrunk his own cancer based on interconnecting why it was there in the first place by not acknowledging that he loved his mother. So things like this, where you emotions are from the spirit world too, and thoughts are from the spirit world because you can't see them, so they are in the same sphere of
Mhm.
realization, right? And so they're invisible, but it's something that rules us and somewhat controls us, emotions, our thoughts, and watching our mind. And
Mhm.
and I think some people find it a hard stretch to believe in the spirit world, but you believe in your thoughts and your feelings. It's from the same reality.
Mm. Good point.
So I've seen extraordinary things in my life. I mean, miracles that have happened with master shamans, and, things that would, I like to crash what I believe is my reality. What I believe is, oh yeah, this is substance, this is real, this is the chair. I've seen masters in jungle do techniques called shape shifting, and Black Panthers stalking around the Maluka, the hut in the middle of ceremony, extraordinary things like this that are not hallucinations. These are
Mhm.
actual things that are happening. So the time for shamanism and plant medicine and where it goes, there is concern about the abuse of it,
Mhm.
definitely. With most indigenous people, it's topic of conversation. It's like a lot of people like myself are not drinking anything at
Mhm.
all because the vibration of the planet is changing. Therefore, the plants are. And so the plants have not settled into this new frequency that we are moving into. So we wait because we are
Mhm.
not the top of the totem pole here.
Mhm.
As much
Mhm.
as
Indeed.
much as humans think they are, right? It's like we're not. We're at the bottom. Plants, animals, people.
That's interesting. You brought that up about where we are frequency wise right now, because I've been getting the same message, and that it's not advisable necessarily to do plant medicine at this moment because of the fact that the frequency hasn't settled and everything is going through this rapid change. Um, and thank you
And
so
where do you
much for
stand with
sharing your story.
yourself,
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
where do you stand with yourself without having to need to take anything?
Right, right.
Can you stand strong in your constitution of self and building constitution of self? I mean, if Oscareros and Masters and Shipibo are not drinking, one has to listen to that, right? To
Hmm.
the masters of peyote and the peyote
Hmm.
church. Nobody's drinking. So listen to the people of the land. They
Hmm.
understand things way before we do.
Yes, absolutely. And that's good to know. You once said in another one of our conversations that it's time to understand yourself in a different way. We were talking about a little bit earlier about how, especially in the West, but really globally, because even a lot of people in the East have kind of lost this awareness and understanding that we are energetic beings. And it's a scientific fact, actually, and it's almost sometimes purposely ignored the way I see it. We're so much more than just the material. And, for someone who is interested in doing that, how should they be approaching, what that exact thing? How would you suggest that they understand themselves in a different way?
Well, yeah, exactly, around the fact that, we are more energy than we are flesh. I mean,
Mhm.
I think most religions believe in the existence of the soul. I think that's the only common ground that they have, right? So
Mhm.
there's that
Mhm.
there is the existence of even an immortal soul. I think Westerners definitely have, we live totally in a materialistic world. And I don't mean that monetarily. I mean just that third dimension, that's you, this is me kind of
Right.
thing. There's nothing in between.
Mhm.
And so to jump that bridge, well, it's more like a gap, isn't it? With
Mhm.
somebody that has not considered their energetic part of their body. I I always suggest to start meditating
Mhm.
and create an inner reality, because once you start create, you have to create an inner reality before someone can externalize it and then begin to sense nature. If you think of great masters and teachers, right, the sages and saints, and when we do dayates, we are not in a city. We
Mhm.
are actually, you know, amongst nature, because that's the communication, right? If you do meditation, spiritual retreats, vipassana, all these things, they are all removed from the mainstream, as it were, and then encapsulating yourself within nature again.
Mhm.
So when you do that, you cultivate this very powerful inner reality. When when someone goes in first off, they actually discover something that they don't really like, because you've got to get through the layers, right? And so the more that they go, oh, oh gosh, I can't stop my mind. My mind is really busy, and you train them to like slow down their thoughts and
Mhm.
come into their breath. And the power of the breath is, that's a whole nother
Yes.
topic.
Mhm.
Way, I mean, which is my favorite topic. And so as they begin to go into that inner reality, something happens. The inner reality always goes towards the vibrational level of the heart. And as soon as that happens, that interconnects. Because people that begin to go and learn to meditate and go internally, something happens is that they start to trigger, um, epiphanies, realizations, sensations. Their spirit body is starting to, live for real and begins to extend. And then what happens, they'll have synchronistic patterns that occur in the external world, like, oh, wow,
Mm.
I knew that, Stephanie was going to call me, and I just had the thought she was just going to call me. We all have these things that happen. And when you go in, they happen more and they happen more and they happen more, because you are beginning to be in, you coming from an Asian culture, right? You go in a cyclical rhythm.
Mhm.
You start to go into the cyclical rhythm instead of going A, B, flat line in your mind, where people just have a tendency to stay in that ego part of their mind. They begin to feel rhythm. And once you begin to feel that, then you're interconnected to the greater whole. And that's what the shift is about. I must say about the pandemic for a second here, how it's
Mhm.
crisis, yes, but it's brought people together in separation. Yes, there's a divide, there's all sorts of different things going on here, but it's also brought people together. I'll just share something very interesting, is that the Heart Math Institute, that
The
everyone's
Heart
got,
Math Institute, yeah.
yeah, they said we needed 5% of the planet to collectively think together, or collectively link into a consciousness together. Now that doesn't mean you have to sit on a cushion omming or doing any quite bizarre spiritual techniques. It's just really in the goodness of the humanity of yourself and what you do. And doing your podcast and things is exactly that, right? It's bringing people that may not have a platform normally to have a voice, or taking vegetables or groceries to someone who can't get out of their house. That interconnects that 5%. Well, they've quantified it just the other day to 25% of the population is in a unified field. Now, I just wanted to share this part is that in Australia, where I am now, I'm looking at the South Pacific, yeah, the Pacific Ocean, and it's just right in front of me here. The whale season has started here. And in shamanism, the whales are record keepers. They say they're the oldest. In my grandmother's story is that we get a lot of information from the cosmos energy from whales. Now, the whales coming up are the biggest pods they've ever seen prior whaling. So this is a very huge and wonderful sign that nature is responding to something that's going on. Just look at the pandemic when we were locked in and we went outside and everything was like gorgeous and sparkly. 3 weeks, nature makes her presence felt. And everybody felt that, even if they're not into shamanism or nature or anything. Like, my God, I've never seen the sky so. LA was like a sparkle, and it's never like that. It was all sparkly. So the whales have increased. My Indigenous friends emailed me the other day, and they said the plants have changed. The frequency has changed. Why? Because the sonar of the whales, one whale in the beginning of the season, a male, goes into a singing contest with other males. This is science. What they didn't know, they discovered this year, is that whoever wins, and I guess it's the females that are the judges, whoever wins, the whole entire male species in the South Pacific, including some of the Atlantic, sing that one song. Now, if you think about that,
Wow.
Is this extraordinary? If you think about that potential of that energy, that sonar, and one song can be heard miles, 60, 70 miles of one whale, let alone the whole Pacific Ocean, what happens next is that the plants respond to that, and then what? Humans do. So this is a fantastic time upon the planet where, if you did not believe in vibrational energy, you will. Just because purely the planetary configurations of things, the science and spirituality wrapping together, frequency machines have been coming for years, and so, we are going that way. There'll be new energy techniques, there'll be new energy healers coming in, there's information pouring down from, from the collective, probably. So it's a hard time, but it's a fantastic time. You have to go through the chaos to get to the order, hey?
Yeah, sometimes that's just how it has to be. Wow, what an amazing thing that's happening with the whales and with us and with the plants, and
Incredible.
that's fantastic. Yeah. Wow. And I think the key is really to stay open and to really be aware and to receive this experience, even on a day-to-day basis. I'm not saying, necessarily go and find a whale. I'm just saying that in this energy and frequency reverberates throughout the entire planet. And if we can quiet down, like you said, so much is kind of taking us out of our daily grind, finding that stillness. And even if you can do it, you cannot go anywhere, but you can at least do it in your home, just to come to a pause and into stillness within, and to ground into your body and allow your heart to open and receive. That in itself is so, so powerful.
Absolutely. Plant medicine, and for people that are interested and that are listening to this later, is, it's a rectification of thinking when you take it. It's, especially ayahuasca, she's the mother, definitely, of all plants. And, what plants do is take you fast track into your unconscious mind. So the hallucinations or whatever you're seeing is the most negative thought you have about yourself. Yes, it's looking like some kind of bizarre scene. What's your fear? What's your anxiety? And that's the grace of it, is that, it brings that to the surface, but it also
Mm-hmm.
brings up, how do you feel in the unified field once you let go of this separation? Because the separation is only what you feel and sense and lies about yourself. And the energy of the planet, the way it is at the moment, that's the theme, is the rectification of thought.
Mm.
That's the global theme, really. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the rectification of thought. We, and the virus and all this kind of thing, whether it's in the laboratory, all this train of thought about where it comes from. It's here, it's meant to be. And the plus side is there is massive amounts of plus to it. Is devastating as it is, and I have lost friends from this virus. As devastating as that is, with the people that surrendered their lives to this new level, because there always has to be a surrender. There
Mm.
always has to be um, a part of individuals that will surrender their life collectively
Mm-hmm.
for us to move through. It's how we do it. It's how it's always been until we realize we don't have to do it anymore. So definitely the rectification of thought. And people say to me, "Oh, I don't know what to do in plant medicine." I said, ask for permission to be there first.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just grab it and, drink away. Like, I mean, I think Westerners have to understand ceremony, they have to understand ritual, they have to
Mm-hmm.
understand deep respect and where that you walk and where you sit. I think Western mindset is coming from entitlement. And
Mm-hmm.
I can say that I'm an inner black woman. I look very white, but I was not taught that way. I've
Mm-hmm.
never felt entitled, because nature at any stage can remove us from the situation. So you're going to just like, okay, here we go. Not that she would, because collective thought creates, drama on its earth, and we don't want to get into that topic. That's another topic in itself. So this time period in ceremony is that I would suggest, ask, do you have the courage to sit in ceremony and then hold that glass and maybe you get a no? Would you give it back
Mm.
to the Oscarera and not drink? You know, that has happened to me. I've gone all the way to Peru
Mm.
to go into a ceremony, and a long ceremony for months, and they've said no. Now, in indigenous culture, no is no and yes is yes. It's not filtered with some kind of hidden agenda, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, when they said no to me, it's not the right time. That's all. That's
Mm-hmm.
all. So I go on a holiday somewhere else and come back when it's time. I would suggest that ask permission to enter. Is this my time? And if you get a flat no, honor it. Just
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
sit in the ceremony without taking any medicine, maybe. I don't know what would
Exactly.
happen.
And
Yeah,
that is also possible. A lot of people don't realize this. They can still be in the vibration if that's allowed. Of course, it depends on the circle and the facilitator. But that oftentimes holding space is a very powerful experience without imbibing the plant medicine itself. And
absolutely.
yeah, and it also teaches us in a different way when we get to hold space for others, which is actually a huge, for me, a huge concept when I first started, participating in plant ceremonies journeys
Very
and
humbling.
yes, it is. It's very humbling. And, you know, we were talking earlier about surrender. I want to bring the surrender part into the journey itself, um, and how people, commune and interact, and how, besides respect and asking for permission, of course, and leaving the entitlement behind, there is also, as I was taught, very much about surrendering into the process. So let's say that does happen, you take the medicine, is the instruction, if there is such a thing, is always about surrendering to the fear, because whatever shows up, and a lot of times it's not pleasant, and
Mm,
to really kind of just go, okay, because it is surfacing for
for us to witness, and it's mirroring what's in us, obviously, and allowing us to see what's already there in a magnified way so we can actually work with it. And it can get scary, actually, absolutely, right? Remember my first one, approaching ego death. And, I know we chuckle now, but is to continually surrender into fear. Is that what you would
Yeah,
recommend?
absolutely. I mean, where there's fear, there's lack of love, right? Is the story. The more fear, the less love. Um, the Western mind is built on control. It's
Mm-hmm.
built on control and a doing mind. So we're always got to do, we're always got to do, we've always got to do. And so, you have to that's a lot of dismantling to, because it's inherited, right? In
Mm-hmm.
a Western culture, we are doing, materialistic, controlling. You have to control because why? Oh, I have to create my own safety. So I've got to control my environment. So there's all that, and any plant medicine will just rattle your cage about that, as you know. And I, even though I have been drinking so many years now, I will come to a moment when I'm just about to go into ceremony. Not that when I'm leading ceremony, that's another topic there too, but I'm participating in it. I will just have that edge of fear and anxiety
Mm-hmm.
of what's to come. And then I go, well, how real is that? And then I say, you know, think about this, the plant world and spirit is benevolent. There is absolutely nothing in the world of spirit that would hurt anyone. And that is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that is projected into spirit is a projection of the person's mind, right? And so what the medicine is doing is holding you somewhat, I don't want to use the word hostage, but in a sense, holding you in an energy field to look. You have to be very quickly moving from your mind to your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
what it is that I see is truly not me. It's just something that has happened to me or a thought that I have about myself. I'm constantly saying in ceremony, I'll see things that are quite negative about. There's a lot of negative energy around self image and self at the moment, anyway. It's like
Mm-hmm.
in the field last year and this year. I mean, it's really intense. And I'm getting touched by it too. But then I sit with it and I go, this is something that is not me. Thank you for showing me. I am constantly saying thank you to the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I know this is no longer me. I no longer need to stay in that thought form. So medicine teach you to handle your mind when you're in medicine so that you can handle your mind when you're not on
Mm-hmm.
medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you know, once you take medicine, you are always in the field of medicine,
Mm-hmm.
even if you
Yes,
don't drink again. The
it's true.
consciousness will not leave you if you are looking to rectify your life, rectify your thought process, and you are on the humanitarian path for helping others. The medicine will not leave you. It won't. It will be a part of your reality. So, do we need the chemical reaction? Of course, is gone the next day. Really, it's water soluble. But the spirit doesn't leave you. Why? Because it is that your heart is connected to this world. It's connected to the world of spirit. It's connected to the elemental world. And that is our true nature.
Mm-hmm.
So, what it shows you and what you can use afterwards is that you will always be in your true nature. The sad part for me with people with ceremony, I watch people go into ceremony week in, week out, doubling up with all different psilocybin to DMT to
Mm-hmm.
combo to,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
cocktails all over the place. Why? Because they want reaction, not integration. So they just keep going for the whoa,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whoa, I turned into a
It's a very
lion.
Western
Whoa.
mindset as well.
Very
Yeah, it's very
Western mindset,
conditioned.
like
Yeah.
how much can I blow my
Yeah, more
circuit?
is better. Bigger is
More
better.
is better. And I can get to say I did combo psilocybin and ayahuasca all on one weekend and Wachuma. Not one of us medicine people that have lots of, ceremonies under our belt would ever do that. Quite the
No, it
opposite. We're
becomes
like, oh,
so, yeah, it becomes so egoic. I mean, that but then that always ends up sort of biting you in the bum,
This
at
is
the end
where
of the
a
day.
teach exactly. This is where a
Hmm.
teacher is essential, because I've seen
Hmm.
narcissism grow
Oh,
tremendously within plant medicine,
yes,
massively, because you got
yes.
to keep backing it up. And like, it's this false plateau of security, a false plateau of spirituality that I've made it somewhere. Never think I've made it anywhere. I just keep going day at a time, I don't know, where am I? I don't even know who I am some days, and that's
Mm.
okay. I don't want a reality who I am. So, there's this egoic thing that
Hmm.
is coming to the medicine. The plants, will handle themselves. The consciousness is fine. I am really saddened by the endangerment of plant medicine now. Here's a new
Mm.
worry, is that peyote is one a very slow growing. It's very, very slow growing. Cactus is absolutely endangered. They can barely gather enough for the church in a certain time of year that they sit in the
Hmm.
Native American tradition, and down in Mexico. Even Wachuma is beginning to be threatened, and certainly the old vines of ayahuasca
Hmm.
are very threatened. So I couldn't even imagine this world without the master plants. That it,
That's
you know,
Yeah, no, that's good to bring into awareness because now it's become so trendy. And but let's talk about that. Let's talk about who who are the master plants so we can explain that to people. Ayahuasca is obviously one.
well, the master plant of all plants in all indigenous cultures, tobacco.
Mm,
Tobacco is the strongest of all. It's the most recognized. It fuels the spirit. It feeds spirit. An acknowledgement that you are giving back. So tobacco, and it's used in different ways. I mean, in the jungle, we drink what is called Amazon tobacco mapacho. So, it's quite rigorous, to say the least. It's not fun, but it purges through, and it can be quite uh, hallucinating in itself, which leads me to Westerners again, is that any strong plant like that will fall into addiction, hence cigarettes in the West.
mm-hmm.
If you do not pray and do things in a ceremonial way with strong plants, they will sweep you away. Hence, if you ayahuasca is not addictive. These
No.
other plants don't have an addictive basis, but it's a psychological addiction in, like, I need to fix more, I
People,
need to fix more, so
yes, yes.
I take more, so it's kind of edging towards that thing, not the physical addiction,
Hmm.
but an
No, it
emotional,
actually helps
psychological.
addiction. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so this is what is definitely going on, so there are so many, but ayahuasca is just the
Hmm.
famous one. There is Chitsuwasi in the Amazon. There's thousands of plants. My God, there's a
Yes.
plant called Shivawaka, which makes ayahuasca look like kindergarten. It doesn't come to the West because people would lose their noodles.
Yes.
I personally have had intense experience with it. And so, but again, the medicines were used for the transcendence of, what can I do for my community?
Hmm.
Where do I find food? How do I find the right tree that's going to help my wife through her pregnancy?
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's all this, right? All plant medicines, you can go historically and look, not just the Amazon, right through, even through Europe. It's always used by horticultural societies and or hunters and gatherers for millennial to help them get through the day. Psilocybin, another one, was used for again, for the realization of what was to come through the weather.
Hmm.
They speak to the devas of the weather.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
Let me think. The peyote, there's the cactus family. Then we move into synthetics, the synthetic drugs that have been around since the 60s. You know what I think? I think the 50s and the 60s have returned. And hopefully with the spiritual awareness that we have a little more than the 50s and 60s, because everyone was, if you alter your reality, you'll find God. So it was in the pursuit of finding God in the sense of locating God or something with the hippie culture and all that. And so a wave of that has returned back to find God, not externally, but God within.
Yes.
Yeah. So we
Absolutely.
have a lot more maturity, I think, around it, and there's a lot more fabulous research out on people that are doing microdosing with different conditions, as it were, and looking at the God particle,
Mm-hmm.
as they call it. It's called the God particle. No, we're not looking for a white rich man in a throne somewhere out floating around the universe. Is the God particle. It's like the divinity within.
Mm-hmm.
I must say, years ago in the Shipibo, I was down there in the 80s. I think this was prior to scientists actually finding the DNA chain and quantifying it, right? They'd been drawing it for millennials. They actually understood the DNA chain. So this is just an example of reaching in and understanding yourself at a cellular structure. That's what they're doing. They're changing things at a cellular structure all the time in the jungles and mountains and stuff like that. The Tibetan way also understood the internal mechanisms from a cellular level. It's very new to the West. So the Western mindset is catching up with the indigenous.
Which is really interesting and heartening. What's interesting also is the legalization. A lot of plants that were not before were Schedule 1, and we see that happening with psilocybin. We see a lot of this now being really recognized medically, as in helping PTSD, depression, etc. But aside from being used on a clinical basis, I think it's important to talk about, and I think each has its own place. But I feel, we really lose a big part when we don't understand and interact with these very powerful plants in a ritualistic way. And this is something that most people don't understand, like what is the importance of ritual. And I would love for you to talk about that. So, people have an idea.
Yeah. Well, linguistically, the word ritual means to make whole, to bring together. So there's that part, right? This is where, again, people are very into the substance, as it were, and the getting the wow experience from it. 99% of what you're taking with any plant is associated with the spirits that come with that plant and the ancestral lineage that comes with that plant. Because which is evidence and proof of this, where people have similar visions that are very traditional and they won't know anything about the tradition. So what are they linking to? Is subliminal suggestions going on somewhere? Yes, it is from spirit. And so what is that? How do you actually explain that? And that only happens in a ritualistic ceremony that has been set in place for millennial, that is not changed. The content is not changed. Granted, the shaman puts their own style in, as I do. I put my own style in, but I will keep the ceremony as traditionally as I possibly can. So, again, it's all honoring, respecting, slowing things up, the power of prayer to allow people to speak, to pray. Why are you here? What do you have to say? And as people, especially in Wachumo, it's a talking ceremony, so people are telling quite intense stories about their life And they're releasing because what the medicine does is gives you the ability in your neuro pathways to neutrally observe, to have the courage to speak and know that that is not you. Ayahuasca is silent, it's inward, it's up to you to handle your mind. The day medicines in a way, or the mescaline, is all around speaking and like grounding that in. This is all done through the art of ceremony. So if consciousness precedes consciousness precedes consciousness, right? If ceremony has been put in place over thousands and thousands of years, there is some really powerful energy there. Christian churches will have ceremony, and with the
With
altar and
rituals and
the
there, yes.
you know,
Same reason.
Jewish culture,
Yeah.
all cultures, Muslim. We can go just on every belief system here that has ritual. Why? Because ritual energetically again focuses the mind. There's something inside of us. If we believe in past lives, if we believe in our consciousness exists beyond what we have now, then we know these things. And that triggers into the super consciousness, into the Atman, into your soul. And it's a familiar, it comes in like, oh my God, I've always felt something about this moment. And so this is what we're going through in shamanism too, with ritual, is to trigger what was in the beauty of what you were. And if you have been here before, and if you think shamanically, there is a lot less indigenous people than there were on the planet. If we can just play with the idea of incarnation, reincarnation, where are all those indigenous souls come? I've gone. Have they come back? Yeah, sure they have. I have met many what we call white Indians in the Lakota and stuff like that. Good friends of mine that walk the red path, the red road as they call it, that are white but speak Lakota, or they'll speak Navajo and Diné, and they were just natural fit to the ceremony. Were they in a past life? One can't prove it, but I would say highly likely. So we, as neo shamans, I won't put myself in that category, is that we are bridges. We are maybe the incarnation. Why is there a big draw to Native American stuff? Why is there a big draw to plant medicine now? Many reasons, but maybe one of them is the fact that a lot of shamans of old have incarnated back into the West so that we can survive, so that we can reach into the natural world again, so that we can start ceremony. Unfortunately, things have to become really trendy, for a while before, purity rises to the surface and the fray will move well on, which happens.
Yeah.
I have hope. I have hope for humanity.
Integration is such a big part of every ceremony and tends to get overlooked sometimes. And it's something you mentioned earlier, but it bears a little bit further discussion, is that having gone through these journeys, these however long, 6-8 hour, however long journeys, and the next day the group comes together, or usually, with the shaman, with the facilitator, and we start to share experiences. And that's really sort of completing the circle. And why is that important?
It's important because you want to learn the difference between contraction and expansion. So what happens is that first you're making a declaration, in the sense, the next day, and grounding what happened, what you let go of. In my training, we don't actually do that. We're expected to handle our own selves, but we're different. After 20-30 years of drinking, you're expected, to handle your mind yourself. So you come together and it's this declaration of like, this was me, but this is me now. And then you'll see in people's dialogue that they had this wondrous experience that happened, right? And very heart opening. to keep that, like there should be follow up on follow up on follow up in a sense, instead of like
Yes.
that one time, because it's
Hmm.
really not enough for Western people, because they don't
Yes,
understand when they're
exactly.
going to contract and go, oh, something's wrong with me again, and then
It's
jump
so
into
true.
another ceremony, right? So the integration, because what is wrong with having one ceremony and waiting a year? You could,
Nothing.
or 6 months.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Because if you're the ability now is for, it's kind of like yoga off the mat in a sense, right? It's like your ability to cultivate what the plant has given you in that expanded field is your only mission after ceremony, is to like stay. I can stay no matter what's coming at me externally or internally. The plant gives you the tool to stay neutral in the
Hmm.
expansion of the situation and fall out of the reaction field. And so this is where, going from ceremony to ceremony to get a reaction, to get like
Hmm.
the wow factor, is counterintuitive, because
Hmm.
what's going to happen is going to make you actually more reactive when you go home.
Hmm.
So many people after ceremony fall into, now they have to integrate and they're freaked out because it's like, I can't cope. The medicine was too strong. The blame goes upon the medicine straight away, which is not so, oh, it's too strong. I can't handle it. I'm too sensitive. No, you're in reaction. Listen to you, what you're saying.
Hmm.
You're actually in
Hmm.
your own reaction. So to teach my mission now is to teach people the intelligence of their own light,
Hmm.
be it on medicine or not, be it with my students that have been taking medicine with me for years and years, sitting in ceremony for 15 years or something with me, is like, can you stay in the expansion of what you felt at the end of the ceremony, usually not the beginning, because you're in a battle with your own mind and your own emotional body, emptying out. Plant medicine has the ability to dig deep into contracted spaces
Hmm.
or dark
Hmm. Indeed.
spaces, or negative thought or whatever. That's its job. It locates. And Wachuma locates, it won't give up, and it goes much longer. It's 12, 10-hour ceremony. It's much, much different
Yes.
with the
San
masculine.
Pedro. Hmm.
It seems subtle, and it doesn't have that like, whoa, I'm seeing things floating around and the sounds going on. Can do if it's done at night, but not as confrontational. You always have got a grip on yourself, but it's profound in the emotional body. So, people learning their light expanded self, staying expanded in a contracted situation, dualistic phenomena at its best.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. For people who are, because there's so many people calling themselves shamans and they don't necessarily have the right training, or enough experience, what would you say in terms of recommending, if, aside from yourself, of course, how does one look for um, a good facilitator, and what should one look for in terms of people or places that are offering these experiences?
Well, in any shamanic practice, or particularly plant medicine, we're on the topic at the moment. You know, if you're going for a job, it's an interview, right? So why wouldn't you interview the person? Like, why wouldn't, like, who did you
Hmm.
train with? How long? How many dayates have you done? I mean, if they say, oh, I've been taking medicine 3 or 4 years, sorry, X-nay stage right. It's like,
Hmm.
no, what was the masters that you worked with? Ask questions. I think people, Westerners, make these strange assumptions where if someone calls themselves something, that they are a master at it. Not necessarily. I mean, if we think of
Hmm.
just normal corporate life or something like that, we have really good boundaries about who we're letting in our house, or, who's babysitting your children, right? And so yet we go willy-nilly into the spiritual world, going like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, you know, what's their background? What do they have? Do you have referrals? Can I talk to somebody
Mhm.
that has been in your ceremony? That, I think, is the only thing I could suggest, because you know, the spiritual movement is not removed from the insanity that's on the planet at the moment. It's not. We're not on a
It's
separate
heightened
plateau or what.
sometimes.
You know,
Yeah.
you know what
Mhm.
I mean? It's like, so there's narcissism
Mhm.
in the spiritual movement. It was talked about. I was with the Dalai
Absolutely.
Lama. Yeah, I was with the Dalai Lama, fortunately, a long time ago. I mean, 1992 or something like
Mhm.
that. And the topic of conversation then was around spiritual narcissism,
Mm.
and how that people were just doing workshops to be self-orientated, right? When everything in Tibetan traditions and stuff is very, service orientated.
Mhm.
You do, and shamanism too, is that I take medicine so that I'm a decent human being, so
Mhm.
that I can help someone else. That's my whole premise of doing it, not to like sit and think, oh yeah, I drank 3 glasses and wow, I made it
Mhm.
through. No, it's like there is this narcissistic tendency that has permeated, and I hate to say it, through the spiritual movement. It has. I think
It's
sometimes
absolutely true.
we've
Mhm.
created, and I'm in there. I'm not the narcissistic, but I'm in the spiritual movement. Is that I think we've formed our own dogma around, we left dogma. Some of us left Christian thinking and all that, and yet, in a way, we've created it in the spiritual movement, making things wrong, that right, this right, that way's
Yes.
better than this way. So there's all these kind of things that are going on, that one, yes, interview your healthcare practitioner, or if I'm going to a doctor, I'm looking up their credentials. I want to know what they know. I want to know the
For sure.
studies, you know. And so I think that this is a healthy thing to do. I
Mhm.
think you would shock a lot of people, because I don't think people are used to actually being questioned.
Yes, no, that's a very good way to do it. And to sort of round up here, how do you feel? I mean, I mean, all of these traditions, these ancient traditions that have been passed down from obviously indigenous peoples, how or what do you think our role is now, knowing what we know and having had the privilege of actually receiving a lot of this wisdom? What would you say to people who want to give back, or you know, um, what is it then, our obligation? What is the reciprocity? Or is there? Or is it simply being of service?
Think, yes, if I just look at humanity and don't put us into categories of things here, shamans
Mhm.
or spiritual people, I, kindness and compassion go a long way. And I think these are, very basic things, and hard to understand sometimes, to be compassionate in a situation where it's very confrontational. There's a lot of energy going on, where I have friends that we have absolutely no common ground all of a sudden, because they believe in something that I had no idea they believed in. That's fine. I still have to hold a space of love.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily have to go along with their belief system, but I still love them. I will not hate, and I think this is a good thing. It's like, we don't have to hate. We just have to love and have compassion for what is going on, because everybody has their own way. There's going to be a point, and I believe, and I don't know if it'll be in my day, where there is a unification of consciousness. This has been predicted for millennials and millennials by indigenous people, earth-based people, or star-based people. They
Mhm.
come we come from other places, and so we see the world in its nirvana, and we hold that.
Mm.
And so for the normal person, is like, can you just, a normal person, yeah,
Implies that
what
we're
the hell's
abnormal.
normal? Yeah, I like, I don't even relate to the word personally. Sorry, normal people. Is that, it's
Of
like,
us,
can you
really, for
love?
all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, can you love in opposition? Can you
Mm.
love in opposition?
Such an
Can you
important
hold?
message. Mhm.
Absolutely, and And if you do go to indigenous cultures, you will find that a lot of the men in traditional cultures are very feminine. They're very feminine in their nature, so they're like, they have the ability, and I'm saying crossing this over to men in our Western culture and women, is that using your masculine and feminine energy is a unification. There's another topic there, isn't it? We've got a lot of topics.
Definitely. And to hold that polarity and actually to embrace both polarities within you, within each of us.
Absolutely, because it's
work with that. And
Aquarian age is the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
It's the feminine age now. It's not about, recompense. It's all about, equality.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we're at. It's all about equality. And equality means at every level.
Yes, indeed.
Energetically, emotionally, physically, in the earth,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We just created nirvana on our call.
Yes. Oh my God, what a great message to end on, Kerry. Wow, thank you for just an extraordinary interview and conversation. And how does one find you if one wants to learn more about what you do? And
my website is Shamanic Grace. You can get me there. That's probably the quickest way to get me, or my email, Kerry Henwood 108@gmail. Yeah. I'm down in Australia for now. I will be back in the Northern Hemisphere. Heavens, I don't know when. January, I believe. Yeah.
And I'll definitely put that information, in the show notes. So
It's been lovely. I love
Yes,
really
it's been so much fun. Thank you so much again, Kerry. Thank you for being on the show. Really appreciate it and honored.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. I would be so appreciative if you would rate the show and leave a comment. I also invite you to join our Patreon community for exclusive content and to connect more directly. Learn more at howthingsconnect.com. Take care and stay tuned.